Hi everyone, this is Laura Schneider and this is my reflection video for the Costa Rican experience, the field course that we took through the University of Colorado Denver, Sustainability and Resource Management. I'm a senior at the University of Colorado Denver. I'm majoring in psychology and minoring in environmental science. And one of the biggest reason why I decided to take this class was because I had already taken the lecture portion with Raphael of Sustainability and Resource Management, and I really enjoyed the class, and I really looked forward to seeing some of the examples and the concepts that we learned in the class in the field, and I thought it did very well in helping me out with that. So for me, this video is about basically what I learned on this trip in relationship to our class, and how it changed my perspective on sustainability, especially outside of the United States. General life reflections and experiences that I had that I think I will carry through, and also the reflections that I took with me that will carry into my future careers. So to start off in La Paz waterfalls, I think I got a really good sense of the importance of biodiversity, because so many of the plants and animals there were so different than the United States, and especially Colorado. And I learned that there's really so much diversity around the world, and that we all need it to keep moving forward, and that it's a really important thing to conserve that and make sure that it's still around. There's so many things that I learned in La Selva, but just a few that I thought were really important was just seeing what biological research was like, how you could really research almost any topic and kind of make it like a life study. And I really liked the knowledge and the relationship that a lot of the staff had to the environment, and they taught me a lot, especially on the hikes, about just being still and quiet for observation. You know, I would look into a tree and just see leaves, and they would look into a tree and they would see birds and insects and other animals, and I think they really taught me to just kind of look beyond what's in front of you and just kind of keep an eye out for things and just be still and be one with the environment. And so if you do that, then you're more likely to kind of see things that you wouldn't normally see. The lecture that we got by Carlos de la Rosa I think was really, really inspirational for me. I liked how he kind of made it clear that the conservation efforts, even though they might be a little daunting, that they're ongoing and that you have to do things constantly to kind of fight the deforestation and a lot of negative environmental things that are going on. And one of the important pieces of that is environmental education and including the people that into your projects with what you're trying to do, because if you don't do that, then it's almost not as effective. I really like the statement that he made where you can create 200 projects that will never get written, or you can create a smaller stack of papers of 30 or 40 papers, and if those are more effective and if those are received by other people, then you've made some more progress in the world. And it's also really nice to hear his history and how he kind of built his career in the field, because it was hard for me at first because he seemed like just a normal person, but he had such a high status in La Selva, and it was really nice to hear the way that he made it to the top and how he just kind of started out small and just like slowly kept with it, and it brought him to the position that he's at now. So I think one of my biggest highlights for the trip was the whitewater rafting and the rafting trip tour in general. Obviously it was just a really beautiful atmosphere, but at the same time I really got a feel for how joyful and playful the people of Costa Rica are, and especially a lot of the men that took us on the ecotourism rafting trip. They just seem like they have so much pride in their job and they just have so much fun with it. And I realize that not everyone can be a rafting guide, but I think that you can really take some of their joy and the fulfillment that they get out of their job with you when you go into a future career. Another really inspirational thing on our trip was when we visited the La Finca farm that was owned by Don Carlos and his son Rodolfo Carlos. It made me really happy to hear that there's someone out in this world that cares more about the environment than just making money, especially in the agricultural world. Being a vegetarian, I wish that there were more farmers in the world like this, because if there were, I would probably go back to eating meat, but unfortunately most of the world does not treat animals the same way that they do at this farm. And it was really nice to just kind of hear some of the really simple choices that they make that a lot of farmers don't, but it actually ends up saving them from future problems, like the rotating of the crops or the rotating of the pasture instead of just letting them overgraze and feed on the entire area that they have. They rotate them, and that naturally fertilizes the crops or the pasture as well, and then by the time they get back to the original place they were feeding, the grass has grown back naturally. And then also Rodolfo was telling us about if one of the cattle gets sick, then they just separate them from the herd and just give that one cow antibiotics instead of having to give all the cows antibiotics. And I remember thinking that that's just such a simple concept that so many farmers just don't do, and it was really nice to kind of hear that sort of insight. So here's just another example of the things that I was telling you about, how they just make things simpler. You know, the rotating of the pasture from the cows, and just, you know, the very simple kind of dairy methods that they have, and also, you know, the really ingenious method of rotating or recycling their resources, taking the steam from the manure to power their dairy factory. I just thought that was really awesome. Lake Arenal was my expert in the field report, so I studied this lake a little more than the other people on the trip, and it was really interesting to me because I think we got to see firsthand the complexities that come along with altering your environment for human use, and how to use adaptive management, because there's going to be problems with Lake Arenal on many spatial and temporal scales, and that you're going to have to keep managing the area, and always it's going to be a changing issue with the things going on. And I thought that was a really good example of adaptive management, and also it was a really good example of the positive uses of resources with the hydroelectric dam and the wind farm. In Brasilito, I made a lot of observations about the so-called ecotourism that's supposed to be really picking up in Costa Rica, and I noticed that not all of it's really that eco-friendly, you know, with the building of large-scale resorts and all the foot traffic and the pollution and the trash that can come along with the people staying in these resorts. And I really liked the point that Rafael made, that when people go to these resorts, all they look at is the beach, and they don't look at the neighborhoods behind their hotels where there could be people living in poverty, and there could be a lot of environmental issues that they're perpetuating with these resorts, but they don't have to think about it because they're just swimming at the beach every day. And I also really liked the presentation by Dana on the leatherback sea turtles, because it made me realize that we really are interfering a lot with these animals, and the things that we learned about, like light pollution, of just simply having too much light at the nighttime, is causing these turtles to turn away from their nesting habits. And yeah, it made me think a lot about how much we're really affecting nature. In Owancha, it was probably one of my most favorite places that we ended up staying. I think at first I was a little freaked out by how rural it was and how many bugs there were, but at the end I kind of started to really like it because I got a really good feel for what it would be like to live in the forest, and you got more natural feelings from the plants and the animals of the area, and you know, it was really actually a really beautiful area. So on our hike to the Terciopelo Caves, I noticed a lot of the really great local knowledge that we got from Saturnal, especially when he just taught us about the medical plants and how he got his information passed down from his father, who was considered a shaman. And I thought that was a really good example of the local knowledge that people usually don't use when coming into a project. They just bring a lot of outside sources of scientists and people that have never been to the area, and they start changing things when they don't even really take the time to sit and talk to the locals who know more about the environment than most of the people that are coming in from the outside. And also, I thought the overlook of Nicoya Peninsula was really interesting because we got to see from a bird's eye view how much the land really has changed. You know, this entire area used to be rainforest, and now it's been converted for housing and tourism and pasture. And I thought that this area in particular was really kind of stood out to me as a pretty deforested area, and how much of how dramatic of an effect that is. Another thing that I thought was a really great thing about this trip was that a lot of us had to face our own fears, and we did a lot of things that probably we wouldn't make ourselves do if we were alone. I particularly was pretty scared of going down the ladder in the caves because it seemed a little unsteady to me, and wet from the mud of everybody's shoes. So I know I had a few moments of freak out during that. But by the time I was done and by the time I was in the cave and I looked up, I was really proud of myself and the fact that I made myself do it. And it was really great having the support of everyone around us to really kind of challenge ourselves and make us face some of those fears. So San Jose for me was a bit of a rough transition because we'd been in Owancha for a few days, and it was just a very different change of lifestyle, and the pollution in the area really kind of stood out to me. But it was also a really beautiful city, and I really liked seeing the cultural influence of the old architecture and, you know, what the city people looked like in relationship to the rural settings, and that was really cool. So these are just some more examples of the culture that we saw in San Jose. I really liked seeing the street art that is done in San Jose because I really like seeing the street art that is in the United States too. And surprisingly, some of it's a little similar and also very different at the same time. And, you know, a lot of the statues represented some really cool history of San Jose, and I really liked visiting the National Museum and getting a feel for what the primitive cultures were of Costa Rica, and then just kind of comparing that to being in the largest city and how much it's grown since then. Another thing that was really great about this course and this class was the fact that we really gained a sense of community between all of us. You know, we sat and ate meals together and we hiked together, and we weren't as distracted from technology. You know, we didn't have computers or televisions to watch. We actually sat down and had really good conversations, and I also thought the really diverse set of knowledge that we all had kind of changed our perspectives on things. You know, not everyone was a geography major, not everyone was an environmental science major, not everyone was doing public affairs. We all kind of were social, economic, environmental, all sorts of different studies, and so I thought that was really good because it made us think of not just one-track-minded thinking. It really kind of made us well-rounded. I think another thing that I will take with me, and I'm trying really hard still to deal with, is how great the Costa Rican people were and how, you know, hardworking they are and how much they really wanted to, like, serve us and teach us things and show us things. And, you know, Hernan was a really great driver, and this woman from Monte Alto was so sweet, and she cooked every day for us, and I really I'm trying to integrate that into the American culture with just being nice to people and being willing to do things for people and not just doing it to get something out of it. So that's me, and that's a very good picture of my excitement about the entire trip. I had a really great time, and I took so many things with me, and I hope that I continue with the knowledge that I learned in Costa Rica into my future endeavors.